Hello and welcome back. And before we start today's video, I just wanted to do a quick aside about a little poll that I was running on YouTube recently. A number of you that watch the channel have got different views on the subject of swearing, curse words, if you will. And I was slightly worried about some of the curse words being used in my videos. So I ran a poll just to find out, one, if you guys want me to stop swearing, swear more, or continue to use the bleep sound effect that I use, or that you just don't care. I like using bleeps. I think it can be entertaining, and I think some users don't really want to hear curse words coming out their smartphone or their telly. So I think I found the perfect compromise. Bear with me. So today I want to talk about this. This is a brand new NAS motherboard. This NAS motherboard here can support up to 8 hard being stuck right into it. And I'll be honest with you, I'm really impressed by this motherboard so far. But is this the right one for you and your data? Let's take a close look at the N7 motherboard. Yep, I think that pleases everyone. Jokes aside, this is the R7 from Miniroute. This arrives with the AMD 8845HS processor and a couple of 10 gig connections on board. Indeed, this is a very similar architecture to what we've seen from certain pre-built NAS solutions from the likes of Ustar and, to a point, Minis Forum recently there. So for those that have been looking at those solutions, thinking they're a little bit pricey there, and really wanting to go for the full DIY experience with a pre-attached CPU, of course, this may be the option for you. It doesn't arrive cheap, I'll be straight with you, rocking around at a price tag of about $489 for the system arriving with the CPU, no CPU cooler, no storage, no memory, and going up to about $509 on a couple of different retailers I found, including the CPU fan and the cables. More on that later on there. Today we're going to talk about the suitability of this, what I like, a few things that I didn't like, but on the whole, I'm actually really impressed with this. Yes, it's an MITX, so space is kind of limited. For just how much they've rammed in here, there's a lot to like. So let's talk about design. As mentioned, a whole lot crammed into an MITX here, and the way it's been done is actually pretty darn impressive. That CPU, the 8845, is actually got a desirable little chip. Notwithstanding, it's got a decent little clock speed up to 5.1. That CPU also arrives with 20 lanes to distribute across the whole board. It's found a really great balancing act there against the network connectivity and indeed the onboard connectivity open to you. Also, with MPU support there, up to 16 tera operations per second, I think at base, I think that can be increased there. Also on board with the 780M integrated graphics that go all the way up to 2.7 gigahertz, there's a lot under the bonnet here. Now, one thing I do want to highlight, on the rear, we've got a couple of SODIMM slots there. There isn't support of ECC on this board, which I know is going to disappoint some of you, but I actually found it kind of perplexing because I've seen this similar configuration to this listed on a few different pre-built solutions that actually do list ECC. And indeed, I set this device up with Unraid and Zimmer OS, and we'll talk about it later on. And when I went into SSH and with ECC memory on board here, it actually at least recognized the ECC. I'm going to investigate a little bit more, doing the kind of offset with the bits listing there. To find out if it actually is going to utilize that. But at least for now, according to the brand, no ECC support. But interestingly, alongside a couple of M.2 slots, one on the top, one on the back, that we'll talk about later on, there is a PCIe upgrade slot. Those of you that have looked at MITX motherboards in the recent few years will know that generally you often find that trying to make the most of a PCIe slot and an MITX and onboard 10GBE is getting harder and harder because there just isn't a lot of lanes. And thanks to that processor having 20 to distribute, not only is it a PCIe, we're not getting knocked down to some Billy Basic there. It's our Gen 4 x8 slot, a physical x16, and alongside it supporting up to x8 speed at Gen 4, bifurcation is supported on the BIOS there, down to 2 4x4 blocks for a relevant card that you install. Again, not unusual, but it's nice to know that it's very clearly available and configurable at the BIOS level. Now let's discuss that port and connectivity there, because as mentioned, 10GBE natively, and not just SFP either. This is native copper. So convenient. I know copper isn't going to be for everyone, particularly in a temperature sense. And I didn't do temperature testing on this, by the way, because very few people are going to assess this board externally with no cover, no casing there. So I thought any kind of tests that I do in terms of temperature on this bare board are going to be insanely relative there. But maybe we'll do a follow-up video with an installation of this. But the two 10G ports there, we took advantage of that 2x10G adapter that we featured on the channel recently there, that kind of botch job USB 4 to 2x10G SFP, and I had to go ahead and use adapters there because my current SFP setup is being used on another review, and I'm pleased to say we're able to fully saturate both of those ports easily thanks to the support of the two M.2 slots on here, accessing that storage there. I did hit caps of around 1.4 to 1.5 when it came to saturating them both together, but I was unable to identify in time for the review whether it was being caused by this adapter being, again, such a botched job put together. Convenient, affordable, sure, but it's definitely not a modern solution with USB 4. But nevertheless, a deeper investigation just shows when we go on to the PCIe distribution there, both of these are using individual controllers of the Aquantia AQC113, and they are both running on a Gen 4 ×1. So again, 2 gigabytes per second or 20 gigabits per second available to both of those means there shouldn't really be any capping internally. Maybe something down the road internally, and we will get onto one example of that I found later on, a very minor one, but still, definitely the PCIe distribution and lane allocation and speed allocation is enough to give enough strength to those ports. Now, in terms of traditional connectivity, not only have we got 3 5 gig USB ports there, which again, I know 5 gig USB 3.2 Gen 1, I will say it does make up for it a little bit. Notwithstanding an internal USB 2 port, which is fast for me becoming a standard integration there. So at the very least, things like your Unraid or a boot or recovery drive can live in that slot. But on top of that, it arrives with a USB 4, a full 40 gigs per second USB 4 port there. So again, depending on your OS of choice, if you're looking at something like Zimmer OS, which is starting to integrate USB 4 to IP pass-through, then definitely this might be desirable to you. But of course, if you want to use like a USB 4 drive, you're still looking at a lovely bout of, 3,000 megabytes per second, perhaps, depending on the heat in terms of sequential read there. It's nice to have that option. And during my testing, it was still able to use with both Zimmer OS and Unraid native drivers to allow me to use USB to 1 gig adapters. And if I wanted to use 2.5 and 5 gig, again, the Realtek adapters are out, drivers are out there and available in the containerized app centers to just add even further connectivity, taking advantage of those slightly more underwhelming USB ports. And again, thanks to this being Gen 4 architecture, they only had to assign a Gen 4 ×1 speed property to that USB. So again, with 20 lanes to play with, that's another reason why that CPU is so goddamn, desirable in this architecture. Next up, let's talk about storage. This is a NAS board after all, and I know there are mixed feelings about the utilization of ports like these, SFF8643. There's 2 of them there, each of them supporting 4 SATA connected drives each. So that means on here, the lovely little 8 bay, but you're not going to be able to use traditional SATA. You will have to use SFF to SATA adapter. And again, if you get the baseline model for this, you can get the cable included. But of course, something we touched on in another video, this isn't the end of the road, and brands like CWWK have been developing sister boards that take advantage of 8643 SFF connectivity to allow things such as this, which allows you to add 6 SATA bays with convenience. It does require kind of a pass through for the other SATA connectors, but on top of that, you've got things like SFF to directly 422.110 length M.2 NVMe's. Of course, you're going to be limited by the bandwidth there, and given that each one of those is on a 3 × 1 lane, you're barely going to break 800-900 megabytes per second for each of them, but it's still nice to have that flexibility in deployment these days. And nonetheless, it's ports like these that are allowing MITX motherboards to really branch out in terms of storage. And before I forget, both of those ports have got an ASM1164 SATA controller on board on a 3 × 1 lane, and it does work with Proxmox SATA pass-through on Proxmox 8.4.5 or 8.4.5. So again, you've got that option for virtualization. Next up, I want to talk about the M.2s. We've got one M.2 slot there at the top. It's not sharing anything there. And then on the back, we've got our other M.2 slot there. Now, both of them are Gen 4 ×4 speed. Yes, you're going to have to think about temperatures. Lord, yes. But still, nonetheless, it's nice to know we've got that level of bandwidth afforded to both of those slots. During 100 × 100 gigabyte file test there, I saw performance numbers in terms of read hitting 5 to 5.1 gigabytes per second, and in terms of sequential write, we saw 4.5 to 4.6 gigabytes per second there. Pretty good over here, pretty much overall. One thing though that kind of surprised me is when I was transferring data between those SSDs. Remember, both of them are Gen 4 times 4 each there. That is a potential 8 gigabytes per second of available bandwidth there. Obviously, no SSDs are giving directly, or 4 times 4 are giving 8 gigabytes per second. But when I was transferring data between them, I only saw just shy of a gigabyte. I saw some speeds 800 or 900 there. Did it repeatedly, and it seemed to kind of suggest that there was some kind of bottleneck between transferring data between those drives. Now, that's not the end of the world. Let's face it, very rarely you're going to be transferring data between 2 disks in the same system. It's very much an all eggs in one basket situation. But I just wanted to highlight it there because I didn't have an opportunity for this review to find out just where that might be in terms of the layout of all of the components on there, and I'm just going to speak to the brand about that, and if I've got an answer, I'll either add it here in the video or I'll link to it in the comments below. But still, nonetheless, it's a minor thing to still be able to get all of that bandwidth on both of those drives. Now I'm going to get onto the one thing about this motherboard that is going to be a real bucket of cold sick to some of you that are really in love with this board thus far, and that's power consumption. You can't have a CPU with, Gen 4 architecture with 20 lanes to play with that's 8 core 16 thread and not think the power is going to be high. And I've got to say, this is pretty high. When I had the board in idle, so that was with the CPU at sub 5%, often straight the way down to 0. I had one 10 gig NIC connected, but it was completely doing nothing. It wasn't being accessed. I had 2 SSDs on board doing nothing. I was still hitting 25 watts base. We're used to these days, a lot of modern CPUs like the Twin Lake and all the Lake processors there from Intel going single digit at idle. And this was hitting 25 watts with no SATA drives connected via those SFF connectors there. So scaling things up when I had the CPU sitting at about 25% utilization, I had both of the SSDs being accessed in both read and write architecture, and I had 2 LiveSync 10 gig connected copper connections onto the rear of the board. I also had a USB adapter, by the way, that was being used as a kind of third network connection as well. So, that's almost nothing going via the USB, but I thought I'd mention it. I was sitting there at 62 to 64 watts utilization. And again, that's without any of the SATA drives connected there or any kind of PCIe card, and the CPU at just 25% utilization. Now, one could argue, what if I'd connected SATA drives? Surely that would have ramped things up, and you're absolutely right. Had I gone out of my way to add 8 more hard drives there, we would have seen an increase of around 5 to maybe 9, 10 watts per drive, depending on the capacity and the level of access there. And that's with the CPU again at 25%. Bottom line, the point I'm making is, there's a lot of power consumption to factor in for a board like this 24/7. It is powerful, but don't think you're getting a powerful board there and a low lecky bill. But with that, you are still looking at a board with a huge amount of capability, even at the low CPU utilization. Great example, I went ahead and started running 5 to 6 individual VMs in both Windows, Windows Server, and Ubuntu. And alongside that, I had the system converting 2 large spec 4K files in Jellyfin, and it did it with the system still with plenty of muscle room to spare. Bottom line, in the DIY space right now, this is a very attractive proposition in terms of sheer power in such a small surface area. Now, with that, of course, there's a higher price tag. With that, there's obviously a higher power consumption. But at least right now, if I had to recommend power user AMD focused MITX motherboards for NAS, this is the pick of the litter right now. Now, how it compares against something like a modern gen Intel Core, 13th or even 14th gen, it's hard to say, because although those are powerhouse CPUs and in terms of integrated graphics a little bit more usable for some, it has to be said that this amount of lane allocation is kind of unbeatable. And at this spec, this has got everything that most users who buy a cheaper board are going to have to end up spending more on just to scale out. This is a board unashamedly powerful, unashamedly performance heavy, but at the same time, think of the footprint that this is going to make in your 24/7 server. Now, if you want to get hold of one of these for yourself, there should be a link in the description to a couple of different retailers where you can get hold of one of these. Again, using those links will help us here on the channel because we get a small commission on anything you buy via them, but only do it if you found the video helpful and you're going to go to those retailers anyway. If those two things are true, use them and support what we do via the commission we make there. But apart from that, there'll be a written review link below as well very, very soon. Do let me know in the comments if the $499 or so that you're going to pay for this is better in terms of flexibility than spending a few $100s more on turnkey NAS solutions. Ultimately, this is going to be a great deal more flexible proposition, and in terms of the casing that you choose to use rather than some of the bigger boy stuff where you might not be leveraging too much towards hard drives there. Do let me know in the comments how this compares for you against other alternatives in the market right now. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Oh, sorry, $499 or so. Hey babe, I'm just going to let you know you're on camera right now. I was just recording a video and I picked up my phone out of my pocket and it's answered. I think I'm going to do, I think I'm going to keep this in. I'm going to stick this at the back. So for those of you watching, I'm going to stick this at the end of the video. This is Gerard. Gerard's called me. It's definitely got to be something wildly important. So I'm just going to put you on speaker, mate. Just go ahead. Just speak to me and everyone else on the internet. I mean, I should have put my phone on silent, but let's go. What's up, Gerard? All good? I mean, are we talking minimum death in? Are we talking minimum death in the family? Perhaps widespread sickness, a fire, a small fire, a big fire.
There's a plague. It's broken out.
It's a plague. You heard that, everyone? It's a plague. You didn't need the news. Gerard, just letting you know. I'm just going to hold the phone up to the screen. Gerard just wants you to know plague. He didn't give me more than that. Updates coming soon.